All right. So we are talking about Alexander the Great. And I just want to make a note. Mariah has a matching mask with her outfit. That's kind of crazy right there. Wow. Fashion to the extreme. I didn't see you yesterday. So, Alexander the Great, we left off yesterday with not even really talking about him. We talked about his daddy, what his daddy did, and then how his daddy died, murdered by his bodyguard. Alexander's only 20, so the only thing we really got to talk about Alexander is the fact that he was trained from a young age to rule, forced into it, and as soon as he took power, it's like, we're rebelling. We don't want to be ruled by some kid from Macedonia. Because actually it's probably pronounced Macedonia instead of Macedonia, but everyone always says Macedonia. I will try to say it correctly as Macedonia, but I will probably revert to what I'm used to saying is Macedonia. But no, Macedonia, same thing. I think the kind of sound isn't in Greek, and that's why it's Macedonia, but I don't know. Like mac and cheese. Yeah, bro. So, they rebel. What happened to the people that rebel against Alexander? Mariah Hart? They die or were sold into slavery, which both pretty bad. So, immediately, Alexander the Great takes his army to battle the Persians because it was Daddy's dream to conquer Persia, and he will fulfill Daddy's dream of conquering Persia. Now, Alexander has a small army, probably 40,000 soldiers, which is a lot of people, Greeks and Macedonians, but they are super well trained. Like, these are the most well-trained, best of the best kind of soldiers in the world at this time. They're the Greek hoplite style, most of them, so they've got their heavy armor. They've got their shields. Of course, we talked about their sarissas, their super-duper long spears that could go give Madeline Kate a belly button ring / a whole open-up belly button from all the way over here. Yeah, painful. Ouch. She's far away from me, by the way, if you didn't realize. You know, they had cavalry and archers added. Super awesome army and super loyal to Alexander. They would follow him everywhere. You should have your notes out and your notes out and your notes out, and you should be writing. Yeah. All right. And so the Persian army, on the other hand, was humongous. I mean, Herodotus just talked about how he might have had like hundreds of thousands of soldiers, the Persians. But here's the thing. Here's how it worked in Persia. Oh, Samuel, here's a spear. You're not part of the army. Oh, Nick, here's a spear. You're not part of the army. Nick's like, but I'm a farmer. And now you're a soldier. Yeah. And so not really much training and not really loyal because Nick's from places that the Persians conquered. And Samuel's from places that the Persians conquered. Now, they did have the immortals like Aiden, the super soldiers that were really well trained and stuff like that. But there's only 10,000 of you. I mean, 10,000 is a lot, but still, it's not going to be enough when most of your army is not so strong. So Alexander immediately keeps winning. In fact, Alexander doesn't lose a battle. Everywhere he fights, he wins. And not like, oh, he barely won, like dominates wins, like totally crushes the enemy, barely takes losses. Yes, Nicholas?
It's like winning rock, paper, scissors twice instead of losing once.
Oh, it's like running rock, paper, scissors like 100 times in a row and never picking the wrong one. He goes south through Phoenicia. There's a city-state called Tyre on the way. Tyre, not like tire on your car. And it was a small island right off of the coast with big, tall walls. And Alexander sends his diplomat, says, so I'm Mr. Alexander the Great, or I represent Mr. Alexander the Great, and he's coming and conquering everywhere. So you have two options. We could do battle, and you could die, or you could join his glorious empire. And the Tyrians, those from Tyre, responded by promptly throwing his diplomats off of the city walls, making them go kasplat on the rocks down below. Now, diplomats, there's something called diplomatic immunity. Like, for example, if a country sends us diplomats, now we can either A, refuse them and say, do not come, or we can B, accept them and treat them well, talk to them, maybe agree, maybe not agree. But when you harm a diplomat, that's like Karachi walking up to me, taking off her shoe and slapping me in the face with it. Why her shoe? Because it probably hurt more than her hand because it's a shoe.
Well, what about British?
Her boots that are probably stinky because boots always get stinky. Yes. Now, they do this. So Alexander does what any normal human being would do at this time. He makes the island not an island by having his engineers go fill it in, they turn it into a peninsula, then creates siege towers, and then goes, destroys the whole city, and sells the people that survive into slavery. Did you miss the part? He had his engineers make what was once an island into a peninsula by bringing and moving in earth and turning an island into a peninsula. This is Alexander the Great. This is the kind of determination that he had. You don't mess with this guy. He winds up going.
That's why he was called Alexander the Great.
Yeah. So he winds up going, turning this island into a peninsula, conquering the city of Tyre, and continues to move on with his conquests. When he gets to Egypt, they say, we can't battle this guy. They open up their gates and say, you have saved us from Persia, and you are our new Pharaoh. Just watching, or do you need anything? Okay. Now, I have a question. We talked about the Pharaohs of Egypt. What did the Egyptians believe about Pharaohs? What did the Egyptians believe about Pharaohs? Divine, sir? So, Divine just said that they were gods to them. What were you going to say, Karachi? And Karachi was about to say the same thing, that they thought of them as gods. Yeah. So this is the point that gets a little problematic for Alexander. Because let's face it, he never loses a battle. Everyone tells him how great and awesome he is all the time. And now the Egyptians are hailing him as a living incarnation of a god. It goes to his head. Plus, at the same time, his mother, Olympia, who, if we weren't about a month behind, we would totally spend a whole bunch of time talking about, because she's amazing. We'll talk about her a little bit later this week. She goes and starts spreading a rumor that Philip II was not Alexander's dad, but instead Zeus. Who was Zeus again? Nick?
King of the Olympians.
King of the Olympians. So,
and then he was also god of air.
Yeah, god of the sky, yeah. So Alexander now is having people told that his daddy was Zeus. He is going and having the Egyptians hail him as a god. I mean, it's going to make Alexander a little cray-cray, don't you think? Yes, Karachi, darling.
Oh, he doesn't have the right to the throne, or doesn't have the rights to be like the leader.
But Karachi just asked a brilliant question, and I love how Karachi's brain goes to these things. Wouldn't people then question his right to the throne, his legitimacy? Well, here's the thing. He already had the throne. So you're right that perhaps if prior to his ascension to the throne, if people questioned his parentage, then that could have been an issue. And then, like, Aiden could be like, well, I'm, Philip II's, stepson twice removed, and I have a right to the throne, But since he already had the throne, and plus, like, everybody knows, like, Zeus didn't come down and, Yes, Carson, sir. Oh, King of the Gods right there. Is that all you wanted to say? Sorry, I didn't see that before. It's hard for, like, if I have it on the chat, then I can see the chat. If I have it on the other way, then I can see the hands. It's very annoying. Okay, so Alexander, now Pharaoh of Egypt, considers himself a god, never loses a battle. He continues on into Persia. At the Battle of Gaugamela, he defeats Darius III. Darius III flees. He writes a letter to Alexander. You can have whatever you want, Alexander. You can have the whole empire for all I care. Just leave me alone. Alexander writes him a letter back. Dear Darius III, I will not leave you alone until you're dead. Love, Alexander. I mean, I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but that was the gist of it. He goes and says, I'm going to chase you till I kill you. And he does. Actually, no, I don't think he kills him. I think actually some of Darius III guys kill him. Then Alexander gets really mad because he really wanted to kill him. And you know how that goes when you really want to kill someone, and then someone who thinks they're doing you a favor by killing them for you, then it's very awkward when you're in that situation. Right? Don't kill people. That's probably the good lesson here. Carson, don't even think about it. All right. So, Persepolis, the capital of the Persian Empire. Great rejoicing they get there. They celebrate by burning it down to the ground. We don't actually know if that was a celebration, if it was like, hey, we won, light it on fire. Or if it was more of a lot of legends say that Alexander was actually not happy that Persepolis burned. That like he ran out of his head, be like, no, don't burn. But it was kind of too late, flames are running up high, and they didn't have fire engines or anything back then. So Persepolis, the Persian capital, burned to the ground. Now Alexander, we're going to learn, actually winds up despite his passion and desire to conquer the Persian Empire and to wipe it off the map, he winds up acting a lot like the Persians. He winds up treating his subjects like the Persians would, giving them a lot of freedom. He winds up dressing like the Persians. He winds up marrying, I think, 2 Persian princesses to get into the royal line. Although Alexander the Great could actually marry a lot of girls, and sometimes he wasn't even there for the wedding. Or it'd be he'd go have the wedding and be like, all right, honey, see you later. I got to go conquer some more. But yeah, there were literally times he was married and he wasn't in person for the marriage and never even met the wife. Because it was all about making political unions and all this kind of thing. So Alexander, though, says, Persia was big and all. It's not enough. I mean, let's face it. If Alexander's a god, do you think a little tiny empire is good enough, even though it's the biggest the world had ever seen at this point? No. Alexander the Great wants more. So Alexander marches east, going further into Asia. He winds up getting into the Indus River Valley. Some historians think that Alexander would have marched all the way and conquered all of India, which, by the way, was very rarely done in history. Battles in the jungle, battles armies fighting with elephants and all that kind of stuff. But there, something remarkable happens. Alexander's men say, we've been fighting for 10, 11 years here. I want to go home. Now, we're going to talk about a lot, and have talked, but talk even more, especially when we get to Rome, about generals and things like that. One of the guys we're going to talk about is Julius Caesar. And a lot of people put Julius Caesar and Alexander the Great in a lot of similar categories. Both fantastic generals. Caesar did actually lose some battles, whereas Alexander never did. But his men were super loyal to him. Alexander's men were super loyal to him. Well, when the 9th Legion told Caesar that, hey, we've been fighting for a really, really long time. We just want to break and go home. Julius Caesar decimated the army, the 9th Legion. Decimation means you kill 1 in 10. So where we get actually the word decimal from today, where you're point, 5, all that, decimals. Yeah, that comes from decimation, the Latin word. And killing 1 in 10 of his own men for saying that they didn't want to fight anymore. And that convinces the other 9 we should probably fight or else Caesar will kill us too. Alexander says, okay. And they turn around to go home. So that's kind of one of the remarkable things about Alexander the Great. I mean, he wanted to conquer the world probably. He might have been able to. Well, not the whole world, the whole ocean thing would have been a problem. But he could have conquered an awful lot more. But when Alexander's the men said, hey, we're done, he says, okay, and he turns around. Later on, in a moment, you're going to read about his men on that way back and how there was little water, what Alexander does too, which kind of shows what kind of remarkable kind of man he was. And when I say this, though, I want to say that it's one of his good qualities, one of his virtues. Because, I mean, obviously there's the whole fact that he had no problem murdering people, enslaving people, destroying lives. So those are also negative qualities. So we don't want to get into this idea that just because we call someone the great, that everything that they did was good. Because I don't know about you, slicing and dicing people is not actually a virtuous activity. Did you have something, darling?
Yeah, I just wanted to talk about even though he was since he turned back, it's kind of it's not I remember in that meeting Alexander deserved his power, and I think had like the passion and the will to do power, but he wasn't like a reason person. But he did. The people who conformed to him were like, okay, we'll just do what you need. He treated, as you said, he treated well, and instead of killing soldiers like Caesar decided to let them, he decides to let them go, even though he really, really wanted to conquer.
So Karachi just had a very nice statement talking about how yesterday I told you to think about, was Alexander great or not? And she kind of subbed up how there were aspects of him that were and not. I hope I did it justice trying to shorten it to thank you, darling. But I do appreciate your thoughts. Here's Alexander's conquest. We see starting over at Pele going, fought. Look, no battles at Egypt because they said, hey, we don't want to mess with that. And then they keep going. And so he turns around at the Indus River and then is going to head back. Now, what do you notice about this map that might be peculiar to you guys? What might be something that you notice about this map? Anything? What do you notice, Aiden? I'm sorry, what's that? So the map, yeah, it is either from your book or a similar textbook. It's true. But what's something perhaps interesting that we see all over this map? Anybody at home noticing what we see all over the map?
His wacky route.
Okay, you see his route. All right, Aaron thinks he notices
Are
something.
those the places where he what's it called? Conquered?
These are places he conquered. Madeline Kate? Say the same thing. Places he conquered. All right, Mariah Hart? Is that what you noticed, Devine? Is that what you noticed, Karachi? Carson, what did you notice?
It's purple-ish pink.
Yes, it is. All right, so what Mariah, Karachi, and Devine noticed is what I was hoping you guys would. All over this map, you see Alexandria, 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 Alexanderopolis, Alexandria, 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 Alexandria. Right next to it, Alexandria. I mean, come on, that's got to be confusing there. Alexandria, Alexandria. Everywhere he went, he made cities. And his favorite thing to name it was, because, like, if you're going to name a city, you might as well name it after yourself. Alexandria. I don't know why he got extra creative on Alexanderopolis, which means the city of Alexander. I'm kind of curious about that one. I will probably Google it. Oh, maybe he didn't name that one. I have to look it up now. I really do. Not right now, but I will look it up when we're. Hey, he did name one city Bucephala after his horse that died in battle.
But he could have made the name, but like he just copied and pasted Alexander.
Yeah, well, when you have a favorite person and it's yourself, you're going to name it after your favorite person.
I see one that says Bactera.
Yeah, well, that one wasn't named by him. Yes, Nicholas.
Family road trips must have been part like, oh, let's go to Alexandria. It's out of the 13 million.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of Alexandrias because of this. I mean, so he named him after himself. Alicia, you have something to say, darling?
I feel like naming just a random city that you founded after your dead horse is sort of like when you have so much money that you don't know what to do with it. So you just buy this random gold thing that has like absolutely no purpose, and it's just like, oh my god, here's a random gold thing. I feel like, yeah, he was just like too rich and just like, oh, another city, I don't know what to do with it. Sir, how about you name it after your horse? Okay, here, this city is named after a horse.
Awesome. Yes, Carson, sir?
Nothing. I just forgot to lower my hand.
Oh, no problem. Just wanted to double check. All right, so Alexander, we're going to talk more about these cities later on, and you're actually going to see it in your homework today too, or I guess schoolwork if you're in school, homework if you're at home. All right, so death. Because Alexander conquers this humongous empire for after 10, 11 years, and then promptly dies. So
Alexander makes the largest empire the world had ever seen, but he doesn't really get to rule it. For that little bit of time where he's in charge of places, he seems like a pretty fair ruler, unless if you rebel, then it's death and slavery, which is not very fun. But Alexander is going to die in the city of Babylon. We don't know why. Now, back then, sometimes completely healthy people got sick and died. It didn't matter that they were young. I mean, he's only like 32 when this happens. You get a fever, you're done. You get a random sickness from all your travels, you're done. Or maybe he was poisoned. A lot of people think that.
Why would you get like a little bit of why would you get sick a little bit and then just die?
People did back then.
There's no medicine.
But they have. Nick just said there's no medicine, which they had some medicines, but not all of the medicine we have. And some of the medicine wasn't good. Some of the medicine actually hurt. I mean, goodness, George Washington died because they thought bleeding someone was good for you. Literally, they would cut and drain blood from your arm and say, and then batch it up with it. And we bled him too much. Yeah, that's one of the things that they did. So medicine was not as strong as it is today, but we don't know. Some people think he was poisoned because he was so young and healthy. Some people think that he just got sick and died because that literally did happen sometimes. He always fought in battle. Now, I know you're thinking like, well, duh, Mr. Kenny, but like, think about it. A lot of time generals, like Aiden's like, all right, you guys go out there fight, and he stands from behind and like gives orders and things like that to make sure everything goes. He was the type of general, he was in the thick of the fighting. He would go fight. Now, he'd obviously have bodyguards and people like trying to watch his back so he doesn't get sliced and diced. But Alexander was wounded numerous times in battle. So he was definitely in the. So maybe one of his wounds got infected or something like that, and he died that way. Another theory is that one of his best friends had just died recently in battle, and that he was so upset that he just kept on drinking and drinking grape juice, and had so much grape juice that he died from that. Because we do know that Alexander really liked grape juice.
Yeah, Mr. Kenny, I know you're not allowed to say, yeah, so.
Lots of grape juice. So that is another theory. I just read in an article, I think it was last year, that they didn't think Alexander really actually died at that point. They thought he had this like really rare sickness where you get like paralyzed like inside of your body, and that he died actually from either A, starvation, B, suffocation, C, dehydration, or what's even more horrifying, D, Alexander was embalmed and turned into a mummy, that perhaps that's what killed him, the embalming process. Which, oh man, like, can you imagine being awake and being like, they're about to remove my organs? Not very good. But we don't know for certain. Yes, Alicia, darling.
I was gonna say, like, if he had been burned, like if he had been cremated, I was gonna say if, that happened, it could have been that he could have burned alive.
Yeah. No, they didn't cremate him. Actually, it's a super fun story, Alexander's funeral. We'll talk about that when we get to Ptolemy. But basically, Alexander's going to be mummified, and then Ptolemy, who we're about to mention now, is going to steal his body. Yeah, that's fun, right? Everyone wants to steal a body. All right, so, yes, Nicholas, sir.
Maybe one of his multiple wives decided to poison him.
Well, that actually is one of the theories, that one of his wives poisoned him. One person even, okay, and there's always this trope of like the evil mother, and throughout like history says that maybe his mom even poisoned him, but that's like very heavily discounted and not believed. Oh, there's some. All right, so he dies. He didn't name an heir. Now, he had a little baby son, but you can't just put a crown on a baby and say, run this place. So his empire gets divided up by actually 4 of his generals, but only 3 of them we care about. The 4th general, the empire, it does not last very long and just winds up fizzling out. But the 3 main are going to be Antigonus, who's going to rule Macedonia and Greece, and say he's ruling in the name of Alexander's son, who then just, happens to die. Totally coincidence, I'm sure. Then there's Seleucus, who's going to rule the former Persian Empire, and Ptolemy, yes, that is a silent P, like pterodactyl, who is going to rule in Egypt. Yes, divine sir. Yeah. Well, Ptolemy is the most important out of all of these, actually. And I'm glad you've even heard of Ptolemy. Cleopatra is a descendant of Ptolemy, which might be how you've heard of him. Yeah. But yeah, Ptolemy, he's going to. So the rules like to become pharaoh of Egypt or ruler of Egypt is you took part in the burial of the former pharaoh. So that's why there's this huge funeral procession with Alexander, his mummy. And yeah, Ptolemy just steals it so that he could be the guy to be proclaimed the next pharaoh. Isn't that wild? Yeah. I mean, it makes perfect sense, Madeline Kate. Okay. And so here's just a little maparoni so we can see Alexander's empire, and we see Antigonus gets here, like I said, ruling in the name of Alexander's son, who will then mysteriously die. Totally not because he was killed by Antigonus. Ptolemy, who's going to be the most famous of all of these, and Egypt's going to be really super duper awesome, and we're going to talk a lot about Egypt mañana. And then Seleucus, who we actually already brought up the Seleucid Greeks earlier this year when we had our Hebrews with our story of Hanukkah, because Antigonus IV was actually a Seleucid king and was the real jerkbag to the Hebrews who said, hey, eat some bacon, worship Zeus. And that's also two things that the Hebrews could not do. Okay, so that's our notes for the day. I'm ending the recording here. I feel like this was a good one, guys. I enjoyed it. I hope you did too.